The Hindu temple architecture is an open, symmetry-driven structure with many variations on a square grid of padas, deploying perfect geometric shapes such as circles and squares. A Hindu temple consists of an inner sanctum, the garbhagriha, a womb chamber, where the primary Murti of the image of a deity is housed along with Purusa. The garbhagriha is crowned by a tower like Shikhara, also called the Vimana. The architecture includes an ambulatory for parikrama, a congregation hall, and sometimes an antechamber and porch. The Hindu temple architecture reflects a synthesis of arts, the ideals of dharma, beliefs, values and the way of life cherished under Hinduism. It is a link between man, deities, and the universal Purusa in a sacred space. In ancient Indian texts, a temple is a place for tirtha, pilgrimage. It is a sacred site whose ambience and design attempts to symbolically condense the ideal tenets of Hindu way of life. All the cosmic elements that create and celebrate life in Hindu pantheon are present in a Hindu temple, from fire to water, from images of nature to deities, from the feminine to the masculine, from karma to artha, for the fleeting sounds and incense smells to Purusa. The eternal nothingness yet universality is part of a Hindu temple architecture. The architectural principles of Hindu temples in India are described in Shilpa Shastras and Vastu Sastras. The Hindu culture has encouraged aesthetic independence to its temple builders, and its architects have sometimes exercised considerable flexibility in creative expression by adopting other perfect geometries and mathematical principles in mandir construction to express the Hindu way of life. Design. Susan Lewandowski states that the underlying principle in a Hindu temple is built around the belief that all things are one. Everything is connected. The pilgrim is welcomed through mathematically structured spaces, a network of art, pillars with carvings and statues that display and celebrate the four important and necessary principles of human life: the pursuit of artha, the pursuit of karma, the pursuit of dharma, and the pursuit of moksha. At the center of the temple, typically below and sometimes above and next to the deity, is mere hollow space with no decoration, symbolically representing Purusa, the supreme principle, the sacred universal, one without form, which is present everywhere. He connects everything, and is the essence of everyone. A Hindu temple is meant to encourage reflection, facilitate purification of one's mind, and trigger the process of inner realization within the devotee. The specific process is left to the devotee's school of belief. The primary deity of different Hindu temples varies to reflect this spiritual spectrum. The site. The appropriate site for a mandir, suggest ancient Sanskrit texts, is near water and gardens, where lotus and flowers bloom, where swans, ducks and other birds are heard, where animals rest without fear of injury or harm. These harmonious places were recommended in these texts with the explanation that such are the places where gods play, and thus the best site for Hindu temples, while major Hindu mandirs are recommended at sangams, riverbanks, lakes and seashore. Samhita and Puranas suggest temples may also be built where a natural source of water is not present. Here too, they recommend that a pond be built, preferably in front or to the left of the temple, with water gardens. If water is neither present naturally nor by design, water is symbolically present at the consecration of temple of the deity. Temples may also be built, suggests Vimana.The in Part 3 of Chapter 93, inside caves and carved stones, on hilltops affording peaceful views, mountain slopes overlooking beautiful valleys, inside forests and hermitages, next to gardens, or at the head of a town street. The layout. A Hindu temple design follows a geometrical design called Vastu Purusa Mandala. The name is a composite Sanskrit word with three of the most important components of the plan. Mandala means circle, Purusha is universal essence at the core of Hindu tradition, while Vastu means the dwelling structure. The Vastu Purusha Mandala is a yantra. The design lays out a Hindu temple in a symmetrical, self-repeating structure derived from central beliefs, myths, cardinality and mathematical principles. The four cardinal directions help create the axis of a Hindu temple, around which is formed a perfect square in the space available. The circle of mandala circumscribes the square. The square is considered divine for its perfection and as a symbolic product of knowledge and human thought, while circle is considered earthly, human and observed in everyday life. Each supports the other. The square is divided into perfect square grids. In large temples, this is often a 8 by 8 or 64 grid structure. In ceremonial temple superstructures, this is an 81 sub-square grid. The squares are called padas. The square is symbolic and has Vedic origins from fire altar Agni. The alignment along cardinal direction, similarly as an extension of Vedic rituals of three fires. This symbolism is also found among Greek and other ancient civilizations, through the gnomon. In Hindu temple manuals, design plans are described with 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81 up to 1024 squares. One pada is considered the simplest plan, as a seat for a hermit or devotee to sit and meditate on, do yoga, or make offerings with Vedic fire in front. The second design of four padas has a symbolic central core at the diagonal intersection and is also a meditative layout. The 9-pada design has a sacred surrounded center and is the template for the smallest temple. Older Hindu temple Vastu mandalas may use the 9th through 49 pada series, but 64 is considered the most sacred geometric grid in Hindu temples. It is also called Manduka, Bekapada or Ajira in various ancient Sanskrit texts. Each pada is conceptually assigned to a symbolic element, sometimes in the form of a deity or to a spirit or apasara. The central square of the 64 is dedicated to the Brahman, and are called Brahmapadas. In a Hindu temple's structure of symmetry and concentric squares, each concentric layer has significance. The outermost layer, Paisachikapadas, signify aspects of asuras and evil. The next in a concentric layer is Manushapadas, signifying human life, while Devakapadas signify aspects of devas and good. The Manushapadas typically houses the ambulatory, the devotees, as they walk around in clockwise fashion through this ambulatory to complete parikrama, walk between good on inner side and evil on the outer side. In smaller temples, the Paisachikapada is not part of the temple superstructure, but may be on the boundary of the temple or just symbolically represented. The Paisachikapadas, Manushapadas and Devakapadas surround Brahmapadas, which signifies creative energy and serves as the location for temple's primary idol for darsana. Finally, at the very center of Brahmapadas is garbhagriha, signifying universal principle present in everything and everyone. The spire of a Hindu temple, called Shikhara in North India and Vimana in South India, is perfectly aligned above the Brahmapada. Beneath the mandala's central square is the space for the formless, shapeless, all-pervasive, all-connecting universal spirit, the Purusha. This space is sometimes referred to as garbhagriha, a small, perfect square, windowless, enclosed space without ornamentation that represents universal essence. In or near this space is typically a Murti, This is the main deity idol, and this varies with each temple. Often it is this idol that gives it a local name, such as Vishnu Temple, Krishna Temple, Rama Temple, Narayana Temple, Shiva Temple, Lakshmi Temple, Ganesha Temple, Durga Temple, Hanuman Temple, Surya Temple, and others. It is this garbhagriha which devotees seek for dasana. Above the Vastu Purusa mandala is a superstructure with a dome called Shikhara in North India and Vimana in South India, that stretches towards the sky. Sometimes, in makeshift temples, the dome may be replaced with symbolic bamboo with few leaves at the top. The vertical dimensions cupola. A dome is designed as a pyramid, conical or other mountain-like shape, once again using principle of concentric circles and squares. Scholars suggest that this shape is inspired by cosmic mountain of Mary Himalaya and Kailasha, the abode of gods according to Vedic mythology. In larger temples, the outer three padas are visually decorated with carvings, paintings or images meant to inspire the devotee. In some temples, these images or wall reliefs may be stories from Hindu epics. In others they may be Vedic tales about right and wrong, or virtues and vice. In some they may be idols of minor or regional deities. The pillars, walls and ceilings typically also have highly ornate carvings or images of the four just and necessary pursuits of life: karma, artha, dharma and moksha. This walk around is called pradakshina. Large temples also have pillared halls called mandapa. One on the east side serves as the waiting room for pilgrims and devotees. The mandapa may be a separate structure in older temples, but in newer temples this space is integrated into the temple superstructure. Mega-temple sites have a main temple surrounded by smaller temples and shrines, but these are still arranged by principles of symmetry, grids and mathematical precision. An important principle found in the layout of Hindu temples is mirroring and repeating fractal-like design structure, each unique yet also repeating the central common principle, one which Susan Lewandowski refers to as an organism of repeating cells. Exceptions to the square grid principle: predominant number of Hindu temples exhibit the perfect square grid principle. However, there are some exceptions. For example, the Chalukya Mandir in Gwalior, built in the 8th century CE, is not a square but is a rectangle in 2:3 proportion. Further, the temple explores a number of structures and shrines in 1:1, 1:2, 1:3, 2:5, 3:5 and 4:5 ratios. These ratios are exact, suggesting the architect intended to use these harmonic ratios, and the rectangle pattern was not a mistake, nor an arbitrary approximation. Other examples of non-square harmonic ratios are found at Narazar temple site of Madhya Pradesh and Nakti Mata temple near Jaipur, Rajasthan. Michael Meister suggests that these exceptions mean the ancient Sanskrit manuals for temple building were guidelines, and Hinduism permitted its artisans flexibility in expression and aesthetic independence. Different styles of architecture. Nagara architecture. Nagara temples have two distinct features. In plan, the temple is a square with a number of graduated projections in the middle of each side, giving a cruciform shape with a number of re-entrant angles on each side. In elevation, a Shikhara i.e. tower gradually inclines inwards in a convex curve, using a concentric rotating squares and circles principle. The projections in the plan are also carried upwards to the top of the Shikhara, and, thus, there is strong emphasis on vertical lines in elevation. The Nagara style is widely distributed over a greater part of India, exhibiting distinct varieties and ramifications in lines of evolution and elaboration according to each locality. An example of Nagara architecture is the Kandariya Mahadeva temple. Dravidian architecture architecture. Dravidian-style temples consist almost invariably of the four following parts, differing only according to the age in which they were executed. The principal part, the temple itself, is called the Vimana. It is always square in plan and surmounted by a pyramidal roof of one or more stories. It contains the cell where the image of the god or his emblem is placed. The porches are mandapis, which always cover and precede the door leading to the cell. Gate pyramids, gopurams, which are the principal features in the quadrangular enclosures that surround the more notable temples. Pillared halls are chaltries, properly chawadis, used for various purposes, and which are the invariable accompaniments of these temples. Besides these, a temple always contains temple tanks or wells for water. Dwellings for all grades of the priesthood are attached to it, and other buildings for state or convenience. Badami Chalukya architecture. The Badami Chalukya architecture, Chalukya style, originated during 450 CE in Aihole and perfected in Pattadakal and Badami. The period of Badami Chalukyas was a glorious era in the history of Indian architecture. The capital of the Chalukyas, Vatapi, is situated at the mouth of a ravine between two rocky hills. Between 500 and 757 CE, Badami Chalukyas established the foundations of cave temple architecture on the banks of the Malaprabha River. Those styles mainly include Aihole, Pattadakal and Badami. The sites were built out of sandstone cut into enormous blocks from the outcrops in the chains of the Kalachi Hills. At Badami, Chalukyas carved some of the finest cave temples. Mahakuta, the large trees under which the shrine nestles. In Aihole, known as the cradle of Indian architecture, there are over 150 temples scattered around the village. The Latkan temple is the oldest. The Durga temple is notable for its semicircular apse, elevated plinth and the gallery that encircles the Sanctum Sanctorum. A sculpture of Vishnu sitting atop a large cobra is at Huchamali temple. The Ravalphadi cave temple celebrates the many forms of Shiva. Other temples include the Kondi temple complex and the Meguti Jain temple. Pattadakal is where one finds the Virupaksha temple. It is the biggest temple, having carved scenes from the great epics of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Other temples at Pattadakal are Mallikarjuna, Kashi Vishwanatha, Galaganatha and Papanath. Gadag architecture style. The Gadag style of architecture is also called Western Chalukya architecture. The style flourished for 150 years. In this period, about 50 temples were built. Some examples of the Saraswati temple in the Trikuteshwara temple complex at Gadag, the Dodabase Appa temple at Dambal, the Kasivasvara temple at Lakundi, and the Amriteshwara temple at Anagari, which is marked by ornate pillars with intricate sculpture. This style originated during the period of the Kalyani Chalukyas. Somaswara I Gadag, Western Chalukya style architecture of temples. Coalinga architecture style, the design which flourished in eastern Indian state of Odisha and northern Andhra Pradesh, called Coalinga style of architecture. The style consists of three distinct types of temples, namely Rekha-Dula, Pidda-Dula and Kakara-Dula. Dula means temple in the local language. The former two are associated with Vishnu's Surya and Shiva temple, while the third is mainly with Chamunda and Durga temples. The Rekha-Dula and Kakara-Dula houses the Sanctum Sanctorum, while the Pidda-Dula constitutes outer dancing and offering halls. The prominent examples of Rekha-Dula are Lingaraj temple of Bhubaneswar and Jagannath temple of Puri. One of the prominent example of Kakara-Dula is Vital Dula. The Konark Sun Temple is a living example of pitted Marugurjara temple architecture. Marugurjara temple architecture originated somewhere in the 6th century in and around areas of Rajasthan. Marugurjara architecture show the deep understanding of structures and refined skills of Rajasthani craftsmen of bygone era. Marugurjara architecture has two prominent styles, Mahamaru and Marugurjara. According to Madhusudandaki, Mahamaru style developed primarily in Marudesa, Sapadaliksa, Surasena and parts of Uparamala, whereas Marugurjara originated in Medapata, Gurjaradesa, Arbuda, Gurjaradesa and Utter and some areas of Gujarat. Scholars such as George Mitchell, Daki, Michael W. Meister and U.S. Murti believe that Marugurjara temple architecture is entirely Western Indian architecture and is quite different from the North Indian temple architecture. This further shows the cultural and ethnic separation of Rajasthanis from North Indian culture. There is a connecting link between Marugurjara architecture and Hoysala temple architecture. In both of these styles, architecture is treated sculpturally. Indonesian Candi. A candi is a Hindu or Buddhist temple in Indonesia. It refers to a structure based on the Indian type of single-celled shrine, with a pyramidal tower above it, and a portico for entrance, mostly built during the Indianized period, between the 7th to 15th centuries. In Hindu Balinese architecture, a candi shrine can be found within a pura compound. The best example of Indonesian Javanese Hindu temple architecture is the 9th century Prambanan temple compound, located in central Java, near Yogyakarta. This largest Hindu temple in Indonesia has three main prasad towers, dedicated to Trimurti gods. Shiva Temple, the largest main temple, is towering to 47 meter high. The term Candi itself is believed was derived from Kandika, one of the manifestations of the goddess Durga as the goddess of death. This suggests that in ancient Indonesia the Candi had mortuary functions as well as connections with the afterlife. Historians suggest that the temples of ancient Java were also used to store the ashes of cremated deceased kings. The statue of God stored inside the garbhagriha of the temple is often modeled after the deceased king and considered to be the deified person of the king, portrayed as Vishnu or Shiva according to the concept of Devaraha. The example is the statue of King Airlangga from Belahan Temple, portrayed as Vishnu riding Garuda. The Candi architecture follows the typical Hindu architecture traditions based on Vastu Shastra. The temple layout, especially in Central Java period, incorporated mandala temple plan arrangements and also the typical high-towering spires of Hindu temples. The Candi was designed to mimic Meru's, the holy mountain, the abode of gods. The whole temple is a model of Hindu universe according to Hindu cosmology and the layers of Loka. The Candi structure and layout recognize the hierarchy of the zones, spanned from the less holy to the holiest realms. The Indic tradition of Hindu-Buddhist architecture recognize the concept of arranging elements in three parts or three elements. Subsequently, the design, plan and layout of the temple follows the rule of space allocation within three elements, commonly identified as foot, body, and head. They are Burloka, represented by the outer courtyard and the foot part of each temples, Bhuvaloka, represented by the middle courtyard and the body of each temples, and Svaloka, which symbolized by the roof of Hindu structure usually crowned with Ratna Vajra. Khmer architecture. Kampa architecture chronology. The Magadha Empire rose with the Shizanaga dynasty in around 650 BCE. The Ashtadhyayi of Panini, a grammarian of the 5th century BCE, speaks of images that were used in Hindu temple worship. The ordinary images were called pratikriti and the images for worship were called archa. Patanjali, the 2nd century BCE author of the Mahabhishyu commentary on the Ashtadhyayi, tells us more about the images. Deity images for sale were called Shivaka, etc. But an archer of Shiva was just called Shiva. Patanjali mentions Shiva and Skanda deities. There is also mention of the worship of Vasudeva. We are also told that some images could be moved and some were immovable. Panini also says that an archer was not to be sold and that there were people who obtained their livelihood by taking care of it. Panini and Patanjali mention temples which were called prasadas. The earlier Kshatrapa Brahmana of the period of the Vedas informs us of an image in the shape of Purusa which was placed within the altar. The Vedic books describe the plan of the temple to be square. This plan is divided into 64 or 81 smaller squares, where each of these represent a specific divinity. Historical chronology. Early temples in approximate chronological order. Gupta period temples at Sanchi, Tigawar, Aran, Bumra, Nashna, Deogar, Lalitpur district, 500-525 CE. Batargaon, Kanpur Nagar district, brick temple, 6th century. Mahalbodhi temple, Bodhgaya, 234 BC onwards. Laxman brick temple, Sirpur 600-625 CE. Parshuram's war temple, Bhubaneswar 600-650 CE. Mahabalipuram 650-675 CE. Rajiv Lokan temple, Rajim 600 CE. Iholmaguti temple 634 CE. Ladkhan and Urgit temples, 7th century. Alampur Garuda Brahma 696-734 CE. Svarga Brahma 681-696 CE. Visva Brahma 700 CE. Badami Chalukya architecture 400-700 CE. Malaguti, Bhutania, Alora, Kailas 750-775 CE. Cave 32-800-825 CE. Patadakal Virupaksh, Mallikarjuna 745 CE. Temples at Mahur, Amral, Narazar, Batasar, 8th century. Ozian Suryu 700-725 CE. Hariha 775-800 CE. Gwalior Telekar Mandir 725-750 CE. Vital Jula Bhubaneswar 750-800 CE. Madikeda Madhya Pradesh 825 CE. Glossary. In design plan of a temple, several parts of temple architecture are considered. Most common amongst these are Jagati. Jagati is a term used to refer a raised surface, platform or terrace upon which the temple is placed. Antarala. Antarala is a small antechamber foyer between the garbhagriha, garbhagriha and the mandapa, more typical of North Indian temples. Mandapa. Mandapa is a term to refer to pillared outdoor hall or pavilion for public rituals. Mandapam, intermediary space between the temple exterior and the garbhagriha of the other mandapas of the temple. Esthana Mandapam, assembly hall. Kalyana Mandapam, dedicated to ritual marriage celebration of the Lord with goddess. Maha Mandapam, when there are several mandapas in the temple, it is the biggest and the tallest. It is used for conducting religious discourses. Nandi Mandapam, in the Shiva temples, pavilion with a statue of the sacred bull Nandi, looking at the statue of the lingam of Shiva. Srika Garbhagriha. Srika Garbhagriha, the part in which the idol of the deity in a Hindu temple is installed. Sanctum Sanctorum. The area around is referred as to the Chattapalam, which generally includes other deities and the main boundary wall of the temple. Typically there is also a pradakshina area in the Srikovil and one outside, where devotees can take pradakshinas. Shikhara. Shikhara of Vimanam literally means mountain peak, refer to the rising tower over the Sanctum Sanctorum where the presiding deity is enshrined, is the most prominent and visible part of a Hindu temples. A malaka is a stone disc, often with ridges, that sits on a temple's main tower. Gopuras are the elaborate gateway towers of South Indian temples, not to be confused with Shikharas. Urashringa is a subsidiary Shikhara, lower and narrower, tied against the main Shikhara. Gallery.